Okay. You ready? Let's do this. You're listening to Explore Magazine's Live the Adventure podcast. This is the podcast that delves deep into the outdoors, will inspire, inform, and get you stoked to explore. And I'm your host, David Webb. Welcome to episode 6 of Explore Magazine's Live the Adventure podcast. I'm David Webb. Kevin Callan is one of Canada's best-known outdoor personalities. You might know him better by his persona, the Happy Camper. He's authored 18 books, has almost 17,000 subscribers on YouTube. He's a blogger for Explorers Online and a columnist for our print issue, among many other things. He has a new book out, his 18th. It's called Around Algonquin, an Epic Canoe Journey. This one is a departure for him, both in content and execution. It's a personal story centered around a meaningful canoe trip he embarked on with his friend Andy Baxter. In a moment, we'll chat all about it, as well as the healing power of nature, why wilderness matters, and how you too can become a published author. Here we go. Yeah, Kevin, thanks for joining me on the Live the Adventure podcast.
I love this podcast. This is great. I love podcasting. I love podcasts.
Yes, you do a lot of them. You're a guest all the time, I see, on so many.
Yeah, but you know what? It's funny. I was thinking about that. I've done a lot of TV morning shows. I've done a lot of radio. TV morning shows, I still do them, but it's like, what was that about? Like, I do 3 minutes of what was that? And then I'll, do radio. That's great. But podcasts, they're solid. And that's what I listen to when I'm traveling a lot. So I travel a lot at night after presenting and stuff of that. And I'll listen to podcasts and it's great.
Yeah, I know what you mean about the TV. I've done a little bit of live TV, being a guest spot, and you get the call, you get the arrangements, you get the scheduling. Sometimes you got to get there at the crack of dawn. At least that's been my experience. And you get on, and it's like snap, and it's done, and you go home, and that's it. It does feel a little like, what was that? I know exactly what you mean. Yeah.
Well, it was crazy because last week, just before the long weekend here, and they wanted me to talk about safety and camping with family and stuff like that. So I did 24 interviews. Most of them were radio, CBC radio, which I love. A couple were TV. And my daughter joined me on the TV. And, she's a 14-year-old daughter. She's like, Dad, what was that? It was like 3 minutes of, we got up at 3 a.m. for that. And then I did 3 podcasts. One lasted over 3 hours. And they came to my house and set up their whole set, and they'll probably do like 2-part series, whatever. But it happened to be just chit-chatting about certain things I never talked about before, which you can't do in a 3-minute TV segment.
No, it's short bites. But yeah, so now that we have you, most of our listeners, I think, are going to be familiar with you, but this podcast does go far and wide. So I want to take a minute just to be like, Kevin Callan is the Happy Camper. Why are you the Happy Camper?
Oh, that means I have to be happy all the time. Well, I wrote a book called The Happy Camper years ago, and it actually was a bestseller in like 1 month, which was really rare in Canada, right?
Yes.
And the media started calling me the Happy Camper for 2 reasons. One was because of the book, but the other is because I'm this joyful individual that loves being out in the wilderness. So I'm not really a survivalist. I'm more of I'd rather thrive out there than survive.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so people caught on to that. And the running joke is that means I'm always happy. And the other day I was with my daughter and some guy cut me off and I flipped him the bird. And she goes, "You're not the Happy Camper today, Dad." I went, "Yeah."
You're not the happy driver anyway, right? You said they're the Happy Camper. But, in this persona that you, when did the Happy Camper book come out, the first one?
Oh, gosh, a good 20 years ago.
20 years ago, yeah. It's late 90s.
A long time ago, yeah. That's the question, because it's all a blur. Like, I'm on my 18th book now. What was that one? That was the big thing, was a how-to book. And I did a lot of guidebooks and where to go. And but then I finally said, this is how to do it. And I did it kind of doing a soft sell. It's like, okay, well, this is how to make a bush martini. This is how you go skinny dipping. This is how you do these things. And people really liked it because it was sort of normal. It was a normal person, not this, wow, I'm the great adventurer. I can climb mountain peaks, whatever. No, I've made mistakes, and this is how you learn from them. Learn from others. I think that's why people liked it.
And so is that basically what your persona, the happy camper, what you want to accomplish is just to sort of inspire people to enjoy the wilderness, but go about it in a very casual way to try and really to make it more accessible to people?
Yeah, it was always the case, but I did not know that at the time. When I started out, Kirk Whipper, the founder of the Canoe Museum, he went up to me one day after I presented, and he goes, "Man, you're all over the map. You're like the most hype. You're like squirrel. You're really hyper." And he goes, "You got to choose one thing in your life and focus on it, or you just go nowhere." And I go, "Well, what's my focus?" He goes, "Your number one reason to live is to get people out in the wilderness. And if once they go out, they'll actually save what's out there." And that was his goal for me. And I went, "Yeah, that's right. That is what I want to do." Because you can do whatever, everybody has a goal, right? But my goal was, if I can get them out there, then they'll see what's great and they'll reconnect with nature. And because all people are from wilderness, every on this planet is born from wilderness. And once they actually reconnect, then they'll want to save it. But if they don't reconnect, you can just kiss that wilderness goodbye. Mm-hmm. So then I started writing guidebooks for that reason, right? Or I started doing how-tos to get new people out, new Canadians out, new families out. And that was the whole thing. And when I started looking at my audiences, when I started presenting, it wasn't, sorry to say, but it wasn't the Tilly hat guys with beards and bellies that mm-hmm. were like 60 or 70 years old that were going to die off. That sounds terrible. But it was actually new people. It was always families. And they were laughing. They were actually having fun laughing and not being afraid of wilderness. Because I don't want them to be mm-hmm. afraid. I don't want them to challenge nature. Because if you challenge nature, they'll die if they challenge.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. So you do come about it from not just getting out there and enjoying yourself, but maybe the ethos behind it is from a conservation standpoint. I mean, I feel the same way that, unless you connect to nature, you're not really going to care that much. You can pretend to care or whatever, but I've never, you send someone out into the wilderness, not even wilderness, you send someone out into a nearby park where they can just get out of the sounds of the city into the sounds of nature, and they're immediately more connected. So that's interesting to hear you say that. Really, that is the backbone of it, that you want people to be more connected from almost a conservationist standpoint.
Because I come back, my background is I graduated years ago, in the 1980s. Oh my God, Pat on. That's how to date that. Loverboy. Oh my Lord.
For our younger listeners, those were bands that were around in the 1980s.
Archaic. So I graduated in forestry. Then I realized I was just a farmer planting trees and cutting them down. And then I went fish and wildlife, and that was great. I worked in rehab for wildlife rehab center for many years. Worked in parks, but then I realized, okay, what else can I do? And on weekends, I worked in outdoor education at a nature center. And that's where I clicked. I was like, to get, educate people. And then I started going work at camps. I worked at outdoor ed centers, and that sort of thing. And then, taught part-time now for, oh my God, it's like 31 years. This is my last day teaching students at risk today for the semester. I've been teaching part-time for 31 years at the college. A lot of people don't.
That's at Algonquin College, right?
Yeah, it's the Lindsay campus, Sir Sanford. And what I do is I've been there for 31 years, teaching endless things: environmental ethics, environmental issues, ecosystem management. But the last 10 years, I've been taking students in high school that aren't doing well in high school, and then I take them to college and I teach them how to ID plants and ID trees and fish, whatever. And the idea is they finish high school, then go into post-secondary, and it's a huge success. Like we had here 94% retention rate, meaning they're not going on the streets. They actually are finishing high school and going to post-secondary. And it's because I take them in the woods all day. Like today, the black flies are brutal today. Oh my God. But we're doing stream studies. So they learn invertebrate studies. They find out, if the stream is healthy or not. But they don't know me as the happy camper. In fact, today was the first day. I've been teaching them since February. And one guy Googled me today and he goes, "You're the happy camper." Not really here in this class. I'm not. No, you write books. Yeah, not really here.
That's funny. So I would have thought that you talked about that side of your life when you were I know you taught at college for years, but you don't bring that inside in. You put on your instructor hat.
I do, because I hated instructors when I was going through college that actually said, "Here's my book, you should read it." Because man, I've never talked about this before. Thanks a lot, Dave. But I always found them arrogant. When I'm with those kids, who cares cares if I'm a happy camper?
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm teaching them how to identify a tree, right? So if you go in and say, look, I'm the happy camper, you should listen to me. That's BS. Like,
Yeah.
But it's really funny. Usually, in fact, it was the librarian that told them. The librarian said, "That's that guy. He writes for Explore magazine.
He's got books in the library here."
Yeah. So they're like, "Who? What?" And they Googled me. So
that's funny.
It's kind of cool though, because you look at the students I had today. Man, they're rough guys. They're great guys, rough guys, and they needed to finish high school. And one didn't make it. He did something wrong. He shouldn't have. But the rest of them did, and that's huge. I mean, you're looking at 14 students that actually were never going to finish high school, and 13 did.
That's amazing. Well, so what do you think, the connection? So you take them on the wilderness, they study the streams, they identify the plants, they spend some time out there. What do you feel is the connection between that and finishing high school?
The reason why is when we're in the wilderness, no matter who you are, we are who we are. There's no facade. Mm-hmm. You can't fake character. And remember back in high school, you had to fake your character all the time to be
true.
Cool.
Yeah.
Or geek, whatever. But it's like you had to get through high school. High school it's terrible, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're out in the woods. We are who we are. I mean, the one kid today, he took off in the woods. He was all upset. And so I went and found him. His girlfriend left him. And he wasn't living at home anymore. And so we just chat about it. But you can't do that in a classroom, and it's like sort of everything is sort of, okay, here we go. If you want to really piss your boss off, take them on a canoe trip in May when the black flies are out and watch them cry. Because they can't fake their character out there. And I think I love that about wilderness.
So you think maybe that they're finding themselves, they're finding their voice, they're finding out who they are, and that's what's translating to their life at home or their life going forward outside of the wilderness. Definitely,
because I've taught, well, whoever normal students are, but I've taught normal students, and I've taught students at risk, and students at risk don't want to go home. And the big thing I have, and it's a personal thing for me, I don't want to know what they've done.
Right. Yeah.
There's a counselor there and there's another teacher there, and I don't want to look at their records. I look at their medical history, whatever, in case it happens, but I don't want to know what's happening at home, because you don't judge in the wilderness.
And you couldn't help it. I mean, if you read you would know too much. You'd know irrelevant information, right? You want to have them then and there.
Yeah.
And that's a really good philosophy, just to take them who they are there, rather than find out something that you might not want.
Yeah, definitely, because we all judge, no matter what. I can say, well, I won't judge them, but you will.
So that's interesting about finding your character in the wilderness, which kind of segues us into a few years ago. Now, you love to paddle Algonquin, Algonquin Provincial Park in Ontario, for everyone who doesn't know, the few people who don't know where that is. You've written about it many times, but I think it was, would it have been 5 years ago? You did the meanest link.
Yeah.
And do you want to tell us what that is?
Don't do it, Dave. Don't do it.
Well, I want to now. I read your book.
Well, first of all, Algonquin, if you don't know about Algonquin, it is a well-known place in Ontario. In fact, when you get off the Toronto airport, there's a sign saying Algonquin 200 kilometers. So it's a well-known park. It's a love and hate relationship for me. I've always gone to Algonquin. My parents took me there cart camping when I was a kid. I went canoe tripping there as a teenager. I go there every year. In fact, I just came back from a trip. But the average portage there is a kilometer. Mm-hmm. And you look at places like Quetico or even the Milk River in out west there, and it's not that difficult. You're paddling more than you're portaging. So why do we like it so much? It's the familiar. Familiar place that you always go to, right? Whether you like it or not, you always love it. And so what happened with that, though, is I always liked Algonquin, and I turned 50 5 years ago. And I was coming back from a show called Canoecopia. It's a big, huge show in North America, the largest show in North America. And I do a big speaking circuit, like right? I do I just finished it. In fact, my last show was last week. Usually this time of year, the spring has sprung, and you're looking, okay, I've done all my talks. I've preached the Bible, right? Okay, everybody get out there and everything else. And now it's time for me to go out there. But I turned 50, and I was in the airplane. The airplane got stalled in the tarmac. Everybody got all upset, and people smelled bad. And I went to my happy place. And I think a lot of people do this. They go to their happy place by getting a map out this time of year, and they want to know where they're going to go. And I found an Algonquin map. It even had dead mosquitoes on it. That's how old the map was. But I just randomly in my backpack had an Algonquin map. And so I looked at this thing called the meanest link. And I was like, well, I've always thought of that. That's kind of crazy, though, because it's for, well, I shouldn't say it is for, but it's usually for type A personalities. So Algonquin Outfitters a number of years ago, they designed a canoe route that goes around Algonquin that connects all their stores in that park. I care less about that, but what's really interesting is it also connects all 6 watersheds. And it goes all the way around the park. And you think about it, it's 450 kilometers, it's 55 lakes, 6 rivers, 3 upstream, 102 portages that add up to 68 kilometers of portages.
Wow.
Who would want to do that, Dave? So
you apparently.
Well, yeah, for 2 reasons. One was I would turn 50, so you always have to do something epic when you turn 50, so you don't feel like you're turning 50, and that you'll know that when you're turning 50. That's sad, actually, to say that, but but also I actually sort of went away from the whole race thing. So many people do this as a race. And hats off to them. I think it's fantastic that they do this as a race. That is not for me. I'm not a type A personality. So the record is 7 days. To do that in 7 days is amazing.
That's insane.
But what I looked at is all these people that did it as racing were not really connecting to nature. They were racing through it. Like, oh, there's a moose, let's go. And I kind of, because I have a sort of a comedy flair, I was like, wouldn't it be funny to do this and not a race? And so I contacted the media, and the media loved it. They go, so you're going to do it in 3 weeks instead of 7 days? Yes. Okay. And you're turning 50, so this is why you're doing it. Yes. And who are you going with? So
you didn't have a partner at that time, because I know who you went with. Anyone who's read the book knows who you went with, but he wasn't involved?
No. And you have to know, Andy, from all my videos, this guy is hilarious. He's a manager for the government. He manages species of risk, whatever. I think he has a very serious job, because I was at his place the other day giving a presentation, and I showed a couple of his clips of him being on the trip, and people were on the ground laughing. Like they never saw him, I think, this serious, Andy. But what happened was I gave him a call and I said, hey, and him and I have done endless trips up to James Bay. We did a 5-week trip down the Copper River from James Bay to Lake Nipigon. We've done a whole month in Quetico, right? So we've done incredible trips. And it's always me that have the trip ideas, because I'm always writing something, writing a book or whatever. And he's like, takes holidays on his own accord to go with me. And so I got this great trip. It's called the Meanest Link. And he goes, okay, whatever. Yeah. And I sent him all the information though, Dave. And typical him, never looked at any of it.
Did he even know it was in Algonquin? Did he know anything about it?
He knew it was Algonquin, and he knew that we're touching all 6 watersheds, so that was interesting for him. But he could care less about anything to do with the Meanest Link. He could care less about, some outfitter connecting all these routes. He's like, whatever, Kevin, I got the holidays. And this gets really interesting, because what happened was, he goes, I don't have 3 weeks, I only have 16 days. And this is where that story really gets interesting, because your listeners will really have a debate about this. So what happened was, I sent him all the stuff. I showed up and picked him up at his house, and he literally was on his porch with his pack on, and he goes, let's go. Then we start off in Huntsville, and we did the worst part first. So there's a whole bunch of ways to do this, but the Big East River is the most difficult part. And I just found out the other day, I didn't know this, but I don't know how many people have tried it. Only 8 have done it successfully. I didn't know that.
So you didn't know that starting out. You didn't know what they success
don't ever
rate.
Do that. Don't ever find out that people have never made it. So we were pretty naive about it. And I think what was really good about it, Andy and I love being in the wilderness for as long as we can. And that's why we did the trip. It wasn't to beat a race. It wasn't to get a badge saying we did the Meanest Link. Care less about that. It was actually be in the wilderness for a long period of time, and also to be on Algonquin and to witness all 6 watersheds. That was cool. So we got to the Big East River, and we're 5 minutes away from leaving, and this guy and his son comes towards us, and his son's limping, and they had just been rescued from the Meanest Link.
Oh no.
And they had attempted it already 3 times.
Wow.
And the son had broke 3 toes, and they were rescued on the Big East River. And this is just before we're about to start.
And so what, did they tell you not to do it?
Oh, no, it's unbelievable. And the black flies were just brutal. And, you smell nice because you're full of soap and shampoos. But we're like, uh-oh. And then Andy goes, what are we doing, Kevin? Don't worry. We'll be fine. We'll be fine. And for the first 4 days of the Big East River, we're going upstream. You can't pull. We know how to pull. We know how to line. We can't on this. All you have to do is walk. We walked up this river for 4 days.
Oh my gosh.
And then we had a bushwhack to get, and we're not even in the park yet. We had a bushwhack across what's called the hill and it's 3,000. Oh, yeah, 3,800 meter portage. Well, it wasn't a portage; it was bushwhacking with the GP up a hill to get into McCraney. And then he's finally said to me, he goes, "Give me the bloody map. Where the hell are we going?" What's the meanest link? Don't you know? No, I didn't read any of your emails. I just want to be out here.
Well, I guess he can't really get mad at you. If you sent him all the information and he chose not to read it, then at that point in time, he has no one else to blame but himself, right?
Well, it's true. But the comical part about it is when we finished the trip, and there's a whole bunch of things happening in between, but when we finished the trip, I actually signed this letter that he sent me. He literally mailed me, snail mailed me this letter. I had to sign it saying I will not design any canoe trips for the next 10 years. So and what we're on at 5 years now, he's organized every single trip we've done since then.
So you've stuck to that. That's amazing. That's very, very, so you got 5 more years of him telling you where you're going every year.
It's driving me crazy, man. It's driving me crazy.
Well, so the meanest link was it 68 kilometers of portaging?
Yeah.
So you think about that, anyone who's maybe not familiar with canoeing and stuff like that, I mean, you're probably doing each one of those once or twice or perhaps even 3 times, right?
Well, no, we had to do it. We always do portages twice because we're civilized and we actually, some good whiskey with us. But for this trip, we actually had to really do lightweight and do it one carryover.
Okay.
And here's where the interesting thing is. So there's rules set by the Algonquin outfitters.
Mm-hmm.
They're not really strict rules, but there's also the ethics of other trippers. So they're not rules. They're just people that say certain things. One is that you should use a cedar canvas canoe because Pathfinder Camp have traditionally done this route and they use cedar canvas canoes. Well, we didn't. We used a Novacraft Airmed Light 36-pound canoe.
And now you talk about that in the book, and that there was certainly some people who didn't care for that, or one in particular, because for everyone listening, Kevin, you were actually doing updates throughout this time as well, so people were tracking your progress.
That was really interesting too, Dave, because I was on CBC radio, and also there's the Spot X now that you know, the Spot X send a signal and also you can receive a signal. Back 5 years ago, they were just experimenting with that. So they gave me a device to test and they go, can you test this? So I was sending out a signal, but wasn't receiving it at that point. I didn't know this at all, but what happened was there was a group, well, there's 5 guys, and I know who they were now, but I didn't know then. They hated me. I was called a Lucifer of Algonquin.
Was it because of this trip, or did they already have it out for you?
No, they knew about the trip, and they said I wasn't doing it ethically. I was not using a cedar canvas canoe. I was using lightweight canoe. I was also doing 3 food drops. You're not supposed to do a food drop. Well, when they say not supposed to, there's no rules set.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, it's not like it's a competition. Like you said, you're not trying to beat a record. I could understand maybe if you wanted to try and get the record but you're just out there canoeing, right? I mean, it's your own business what you're doing.
Yeah, and the thing is, though, that you're not cheating when you're telling everybody on CBC radio and social media. And by that time, there was 11,000 people following this trip. I didn't know that because I could send the signal out, but I didn't know until I got 3/4 way through. I got to Opeongo at this point, and the outfitter said, "Do you know how many people are following this?" I was like, "No," and I wish I never knew because I didn't. But people despise these guys because they said, because here's the thing. You know, again, I'm not cheating if I'm telling people I'm cheating. And also I have a sense of humor. So we got to Opeongo Lake, for example, and you're supposed to paddle across it. And I paddle across that lake many, many times. So it's not that I haven't done it. But it's the longest lake in the park. I just used a satellite phone and got a guy to boat us across. But the main reason why was Andy only had 16 days. Right. So his idea was, look, I'll leave you at Opeongo. I'll go home and you can continue on your own.
Yeah.
And fine. By the time we got about 3/4 way through, he says, well, I want to finish this. I said, well, the only way we're going to finish this and you and I together is to cheat a bit. And we're okay with that. You have that choice. Imagine going with your buddy that you've known for years and you either leave him and finish it on your own, or you jokingly cheat and then finish it together. Like, I don't think there's any choice. Like, you'd have to go with the second.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, a lot of this stuff, it's most of it just so arbitrary, and people like to apply these rules to what you should and shouldn't do. And I mean, there's obviously etiquette that you follow in terms of leave no trace and stuff like that, but that has nothing to do with this. This is just how you're choosing to to explore. And I know I've dealt with that a lot. People who want you to do certain things a certain way. I remember I got in a conversation with one of the park superintendents in Quetico and saying that some people were trying to ban kayaks from Quetico because it was supposed to be canoe only or something,
Really?
and it was just, there was no reason behind it. It was just, these were just, it was just a basically a little fringe group of people trying to say that kayaks shouldn't be there because you can't portage them properly, and that these pedal kayaks shouldn't be allowed either. And they said, well, it's non-motorized, so maybe you don't like the pedal kayaks, but they're non-motorized. So
wow, that's judgmental for sure.
But and people have their reasons, I guess. But it is funny to hear that that people were actually really out to get you a little bit, because I believe one of them stole your whiskey.
And I can't make this stuff up, Dave. I mean, you know me as a writer. I mean, you know me for many years, and I'm Irish and Scottish heritage, right? So I'll just exaggerate a lot. I can't make this story up. So what happened was, we get to Cedar Lake, which is about a little over halfway through the trip, and we got our second food drop at the outfitter there. And I get the box that I mailed there, and I open it up, and all my food's there, but there's no whiskey flask for the next part of the trip. So I asked the outfitter, I went, where's the whiskey? He was, Kevin, it'd be really funny if I stole it, but I would never not tell you that, because it wouldn't be funny. He goes, I have no idea where it went. I found out later, and it took a year, I think it was over a year later, I found out who did it. And it was one of those people that hated me, and they didn't do it as a joke. They did it
maliciously.
Yeah. That's wrong, Dave. You don't steal someone's whiskey.
I would say, it's quite ironic to think that this person thinks you're breaking etiquette, and so to do that, they steal something from your food drop. I mean, that's insane. The irony is too much to even comprehend, I think, at that point in time.
It actually didn't even make sense to me. In fact, I'm thinking, well, why would you? I don't get why you would do this. But here's the magical thing about people, the outdoors, the true sense of connection we all have out there. I went on CBC radio and social media, and I said, for the love of God, someone save us. Someone stole our whiskey. What are we going to do? And again, I can't see the response at that time. I mean, now we can, but back then we couldn't. And we started paddling, and people came in from everywhere to deliver us whiskey. This is a magical moment in my life. I'd get to the portage, and there would be a sign saying, way to go, Kevin and Andy, keep going, and there'd be a flask. We'd go to the next portage. Don't give up, and there'd be a flask. There was whiskeys everywhere for the entire trip. In fact, even if you watch the one video, there's a massive wooden sign nailed to a tree, saying "way to go," and it's unbelievable. So you must have ended up with a lot of flasks. When we got to the one, our third food drop, I actually dropped whiskey off. I couldn't carry it all. That's an unusual problem to have in the wilderness, for sure. So much whiskey, you can't carry it. It was terrible. We even got to the one portage on the Crow River, and to do the Crow River, the Lower Crow, it's just crazy. You're portaging. There was one portage, I think it was about 1.5 kilometers, and then there was about a section of water that's probably the size of a bathtub, and then you do another 3 kilometers after that. Oh my gosh! And, all you're doing was walking up the Crow River, and we got 2 or 3 flasks along there too. So whoever paddled in to deliver that did a lot of work to do it. That's great. I really enjoyed the book, the Once Around Algonquin, but it surprised me though. I mean, telling these stories a little, what you're talking about right now, what surprised me about this book is I was expecting sort of an A to B travel log about the trip. Just how because there would be plenty of stories. I mean, obviously, and you could just describe what you're doing and you keep us all engaged, but that's not what it is. It actually, I felt like it really followed the mindset of the wilderness traveler, because I know when I'm hiking or paddling or something like that, as much as I'm trying to be mindful all the time, my mind does wander, and you think about things in your life. You get fixated, you look at maybe you see some litter on the trail, and you start thinking about the concepts of leave no trace and etiquette, and then you think about the history of the place, and then you think about something that's going on in your life and work through it. And I really liked the way you splice that in about the trip, about how it wasn't just an A to B. It's about park history. It's about yourself. I mean, you talk about your family dynamics, with your daughter and your parents, your tales of your past trips, and you even get very, very personal
discussing your marriage at the time and the breakdown of your marriage. And I just want to know what did it mean to you to put all that together, all this sort of this cohesive thought, and what this wilderness trip really meant.
Yeah, wow. What happened with that was, you're right. I've written guidebooks and I've written how-to books. I've also written personal stories for blogs and stuff like that for exploring stuff. But what happened was I sat on the porch in the morning for 5 years writing what I would call a journal. About 3 years into it, I said, this is a book. It's almost like a Bill Bryson Walk in the Woods book mixed in with Lonely Land, Sigurd Olsen kind of idea. And even though I'm the happy camper, I actually have a very serious side to me. And that's why I am the happy camper. It's almost like a Charlie Farquharson, if you ever read his old stuff, he was a silly guy. He was actually quite serious. But I wanted to create a message, I guess, or maybe, I don't know. I just want to do something different. Another bend in the river, right? And I finished the book and I said, well, I guess this is a book. It's not just a journal entry. So I went to my publisher, Firefly, and I published with, and I said, here's the book. And they said, well, that's good. It's not really usually what you do, so I'm not sure. We'll look at it. I went, that's fine. And then they said, well, maybe in a couple of years. I went, that's fine. So I went to another publisher. And so it was actually Sandy Mowat at CBC Radio, which is actually probably Mowat's son. I know him more of a friend than anything. And he goes, you should self-publish this, man. Like, why are you not self-publishing this? I went, wow, self-publishing book? Like, why? I've written already 17 books to a publisher.
It surprised me, and it actually surprised me to hear right now that after 17 books, they didn't sort of trust you a little bit. That you had something worthwhile here.
It wasn't to do with that. It was just because Firefly. Well, I'm guessing because they really didn't say, but I'm guessing because that's not their style. Firefly always does how-to books. So I could have went to another publisher, and in fact, I had a lot of friends. And here's the thing too, I'm very naive with what I do. I'm very naive of my fan base and audience base and stuff like that. And that's a good thing. Right? In fact, my daughter always laughs at me, right, about that. Like I was at the store the other day and people were asking me questions, whatever. And my daughter goes, Dad, you have no idea what you do, dude. So the thing is, when I did that, that it's okay, well, they don't really want that style of book. I could go to another publisher. But then when Sandy Mowat said, he goes, Kevin, you do a lot of the work. You do the shows, you do the road circuit, you do the media. That's not through the publisher. That's something you do. You actually get sponsors to help students at risk. You do all these things. So he goes, why not self-publish? I went, well, and in the writing world, it's like if you self-publish, the perception is, well, you're not really a published author. You're just a self-published author. And he started giggling. He goes, Kevin, you have 17 books. Yeah. They're bestsellers. What the hell is your problem? And then I did the math and I said, well, yeah, because I would get 8% royalty on those books. And I never ever went into publishing and writing for money. And Dave,
that's good. That's good.
There's no money, right? You know that, right? And I did it for ethical reasons to make a change and whatever. And I knew that going right into it. But then I found out I was making 8% on all my other books. I was making 70 to 40% on a self-published book. Wow. I was like, wow, that's a lot more.
Yes.
I should look into that.
And so how did that process start? So you had the book, you had it written, what you would call your final draft or close to it. So then what was the next step after that? Because I know a lot of people out there are probably thinking, wait a minute, I have stories to tell. So, I mean, if you want to do any how-to, let's talk about how to self-publish a book.
Yeah, and I think people should really look into this because there's a lot of people with great, incredible stories, and they're halted because they think they have to get a publisher. There are also a lot of people that have crap that, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but the reality is that they don't have the background and they should not be writing a book. And well, my God, you see that over your desk every day, right? Yes. It's like read a piece, you're like, oh, Jesus. And so the whole thing is, this is what's interesting. I hired professionals. So I got a designer that I used to work with years ago through Boston Mills Press, and they became Firefly. But she was a designer, Jill. And I said, Jill, can you design my book? And yeah, I had to pay her a good chunk of money and well deserved. right? And then I got an editor that I knew really well, and I paid her a bunch of money, well deserved. So it was just over $5,000 that I spent to get this book out,
Wow.
and looking like a book, right?
Does that include that? Does that include the fee to the to get it printed and everything? That can't include that. No.
No, this is great stuff. So I had a bunch of choices. Go to YouTube and watch a whole bunch of videos and do your research with that. But I could have gone through Amazon. They have a program through there. I'm not dismissing Amazon, but I'm not a big fan of Amazon. You can't escape Amazon. I'm not saying that. Negative thing, but I didn't want.
I think everyone has a bit of a love-hate relationship with Amazon.
I think because it's a robot, right? I mean, I don't think there's real people that live there. But the thing about it is I wanted it still in libraries, and I also wanted it in concrete bookstores as well.
So the print version was important to you. You just didn't want to do an ebook. Because I know a lot of self-publishing. I mean, that's the first place people go is just the ebook. It's the easiest and cheapest, I suppose. But
it is. I got to tell you right now, I did an ebook, and I made $10 off ebook. I've made $7,000 off the regular book. So in the last month. So ebooks are important. I'm not saying that, but you got to do everything, right? In fact, I also want, all these people are asking me to do an audiobook, and I will do it, but I can't stand my voice. I could never. How many days would you have to read this out? Oh my Lord.
Oh, I've known people who did an audiobook of there, and it is a ton of work, just sitting in a studio for hours on end, reading it flawlessly too, right? So,
man. And I do some work with these guys at Burchard Media now and then, and they have a studio. They said, no problem, you can use their studio for doing your audiobook, but we cannot be there for it because we can't hear your voice all the time.
Hey, that's not nice. I like your voice.
No, I agree with it. Almost to God, I'm like, yeah. But so the whole idea is, so when I went through Ingram Spark, and goods and bads about that is Ingram Spark does send your book out to mortar and brick bookstores. They also send it to Amazon. And they also send it Barnes and Nobles. They also send it to Indigo. They send it to everybody. So. But in its print on demand, so that's the whole thing. So they print the book and then they send it out. I would say the only negative thing is it's in the United States, and there's no Canadian print on demand company that I know of. So when my books are printed, they're printed in the United States or the UK or New Zealand or Australia, but they're never printed in Canada. So it's different, but I think that was the best choice. You send it to them, and then you have to man, it takes so much time. I remember that was another nightmare. I got the book through. I ordered my book for review before people started buying it. But because I'm cheap, I guess, because I'm Scottish, I actually did the cheap mailing, and then I never got that book for a month and a half. People were buying the book a month before I even looked at it. Like, that was a huge error in my part. And that is the greatest thing about self-publishing, though, Dave. I gotta say, if anything goes wrong, it's my fault. I love that part about it. There was nobody to complain to. It was my fault. It's my book. I invested the money, but it was scary. Like $5,000 to me is a lot of money. Like I did a line of credit, right, for the $5,000, and I'd never questioned giving the money to the people that I hired because they did top notch. It was fantastic. But the book came out, and just over a month, I paid that back.
That's amazing. And so you must have worked hard to distribute it through your own means as well, with your speaking tour and social media and YouTube and all that. Because like your friend said, Sandy Mowat, that you were doing that so much work. I mean, you have the means to almost be your own publisher because you have this outlet. And
that was the huge advantage I had. I actually had that outlet already.
Yeah.
I wasn't just starting. Mind you, if you're just starting, even when the other day I spoke at a library, and my daughter was 14, and I said, hey, you want to go with me? Oh, Dad. I don't know if anybody here has a 14-year-old, but they're aliens. And, oh, no, okay, look, if you go with me, you keep the sales of the book. So you sell my book, I'll present, and you keep the profit. $360 that night. And I wish I made that. But I stupidly said, no, you can keep it. But $360, that's a good chunk of change. if I went there with my other books, I would make 8% of the book sales.
Yeah.
Right. So even if you're just starting out and you speak at a bunch of libraries and you make some pocket change, as long as it's a good story, and you are well more noted for this. Like, if there's no story, it doesn't matter how well you do. You got to create a story. And The Meanest Link was a good story. I mean, you can't make up someone stealing your whiskey.
Yeah, it was full of great stories. And like I said, and also just being out there in the wilderness for 16 days and during that time in your life and everything, there was so much around that you could talk about too. I mean, there were chapters, you're the happy camper. There were chapters where you were not that happy, talking about the things that upset you in the wilderness and the things that you're working through and stuff like that. So there was a great read. I really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was more of a personal book, and I was really nervous of it going out.
Oh, I bet. I bet. I mean, I can, now that you say it started as a journal, I do see that. I mean, it has a book structure for sure, but I can see that how it started, because it's very personal.
Well, the spooky thing about that was Andy didn't know anything, and he's a really good friend to do this trip for me, because what happened was when he said, I'm going to finish this trip, I went, no problem. We were on the one portage called the Dixon Bonfield, and it's a 5 kilometer plus, right? What was really funny is that morning, because we have a sense of humor, he goes, what's next? What's today? I went, oh, we're only doing a 500 meter portage. Well, it's not. It's 5 kilometers, right? And we get to the portage. He's like, you son of a...
Like, oh, sorry, I missed a decimal point there. My
I know. Yeah. And he didn't know what was going on in my life. It was I'm a very private person, even though guard, because I'm not when you read all my stuff, but I am. And I was married for 21 years, knew the person for 10 years before that too. And all of a sudden she, wanted a separation. And that happens when people are in their 50s. People want to look at the greener grass on the other side. I was, I can't get into detail about it, but in fact, actually the editor asked me to get into more detail. But the reality of it is things happen, right? But I was just going through that at the time. So I had motivation to be on that trip. I could go across the portage because what else did I have? I could either do this long portage or I could be home dealing with all this stuff that was just dumbfounding me, right? Yeah. Whereas Andy, he didn't. And what was really interesting the other day, we were having a pint the other day, and he's like, that's really interesting because I didn't know that you're going through it. He knows it now, but he goes, I didn't know that's when it started. I went, yeah, that's when it started. He goes, that it's the kicker. It's when we finished the trip, and you imagine 16 days, the trip, you want to go home and have a shower and see your family, hug your kids, whatever. He left, and I didn't. I stayed around for a bit, and he thought that was the weirdest thing. He goes, why would you just hang around and not boot to get home? And then he goes, bingo, something's going on. But what's really interesting about that is it's like, that's life. Like, you know how many people in this world have dealt with that? Like, lots of people, right? And
millions.
So, yeah. So,
but it doesn't make it any less significant for you, though. You know what I mean? The fact that, it's still, you don't want to dismiss it by saying like, oh, well, a lot of people have done this. A lot of people have done a lot of things. It doesn't detract from your experience, or doesn't lessen your experience.
No, it doesn't. But to go back to what we were saying at the very beginning is you are who you are out there. And what really helped me was because you feel break down. You're like, what have I done? Should I have done something? Whatever. I don't know what's going on. And then you are who you are out there. And actually halfway through the trip, I went, I like who I am.
So then it's fair to say the Meanest Link, Algonquin, the wilderness, this particular trip was healing for you.
Oh, big time. Big time. To the point that it's a stupid route. I mean, Algonquin Outfitters would hate me saying that because, Kevin's going to do the Meanest Link that will help us promote. And I'd go around everybody, don't do it. Don't do it. But
it's a small amount of people that would, so I guess they're probably going to.
I met a group. They actually head out next week. They're doing the trip, and I met them, and they're all very type A personalities. And you even look at their social media pages, and it's all about where are we going. And so the one guy, Derek, he personally asked me. He goes, "What? Should I be worried?" I went, "Yeah." It's a bad trip. Like, and especially in June, the bugs are going to eat you alive. The Big East River is in flood right now. It's like, it's going to be tough. And he goes, well, what would you have to say? And I go, it's all mental, not physical. All mental. And the reason why Andy and I did so well is we've done so many trips in the past that really the Meanest Link was nothing. It was just another time in the bush.
That's interesting with the mental. I mean, I know a lot of people who I've talked to agree about long expedition trippers like Frank Wolf and guides that I know. I mean, I remember talking to this guide when I was up in the Arctic one time, and he did cross Baffin Island ski trips in winter. And I said, who goes on that? And he said, before he takes the people, he just has a long conversation and finds out who they are mentally. He says, as far as the physical goes, you just got to ski, and you know what I mean? Like, you don't have to do that much. It's all up in your mind and your ability to mentally push through it.
Well, it's true. If you look at it, like Colin Angus, Frank Wolf, like all of us that write for Explore, we're not all normal.
No, how could you be?
Frank Wolf, I swear to God, like that man's a Looney Tune. Like,
that's what my dad says every time he reads one of the Frank's articles. He's like, this guy, I can't even believe him. 1,800 kilometers in the tundra for 40 days. Oh, what is he thinking? He loves it though, but.
Oh yeah, and he makes my day when I read his stuff. I got to say, like when I actually researched all the people that paddled across Canada at one point for an article, and they're all not normal. But then again, who's normal?
Who's the judge of who's normal? Maybe they are normal. Maybe the people who aren't normal.
Well, I gotta sort of say this one thing. So students at risk, right? They don't want to go home. They love being in the woods because they're who they are. I wrote about this in the book too. I have also taken, what we call normal, but second-year outdoor leadership program students at the college on 7-day backpacking trips in Algonquin. In the last few years, I've done major evacuations. Every single one of them. In fact, I think I've added up now to 12 evacs on day 2 of 7-day trip, all of them because of anxiety attacks. And these are students that want to graduate to be guides. They're not students at risk. They're
So what's the connection?
I think what's happening, it's terrifying too, because all the people I work with are top notch. And so we all got together and said, my God, what's happening? What do we do? How do we deal with it? So we all decided that we're going to take first aid courses for mental disability instead of, and also physical. But the last 3 years, I haven't fixed a broken arm. I haven't fixed a bleeding leg. I've also, I've dealt with, Kevin, I'm going to kill myself. I can't continue.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So I'm and this is what we call a normal student, right? And so I said, okay, well, that is an injury. It's the same as a physical injury. I will get you out, just like first aid. I will get you to someone that will help you. And then it'll continue on. So I've done that, but I'm thinking, why is this happening? Like, that's insane. I've never done that many evacs in my entire career of 37 years of taking people out.
So do you have a theory?
Well, some days I do and some days I don't. But I think that they're just not connected and the phobias are beyond. So
it's lack of exposure, I guess, right? You're just not comfortable out there.
Yeah, and it's addictions too. Like I deal with students at risk that have drug addictions, but by the time they get to me, they want to be done with that. But those students I took out have addictions with technology, probably. You think about it, they're going to be disconnected with social media the next day. So they're like, oh, I don't know if I can do that. So they sort of make up this idea that they can't do it. And of course, I, as an instructor, have to haul them out because I can't. In the old days, maybe you would say, too bad for you, buddy, you're going to do it. But now you can't do that.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that we should be going back in time. And I got to say, I love these kids. Like I'm it's not a negative. I think these guys are amazing, but mental breakdown like that many is insane. What's really cool, because I always want to look at the positive, not negative. If you look at the videos I've done with those students that I took backpacking, when the ones that made it, it's magical.
I bet.
They don't want to go home. On day 7, these guys do not want the trip to end. But here's the thing that I've never really written about because I really kind of can't. But the reality of it is, when those groups get back to their regular class, could you imagine? Here's a group that made the 7 days, and here's the small group that actually did the 2 days and got bailed out. So my boss said, yeah, they're bullying those kids that actually didn't make it. I went, yeah, bully is one word, but you got to imagine these kids did 7 days in the bush in the fall during snow and sleet. The other guys got bailed out. 3 of the 5, the last year, by the way, I said I need a doctor's note, and they came back and it was forged.
Oh gosh.
But that's another story. But what the thing was going on is I can't stop that. These kids magically transform themselves and empower themselves, not empower themselves to conquer nature because that's stupid, but they empower themselves because of nature. And the other ones that didn't, sorry, you didn't. And then I also have a bunch of them that still want to graduate and pass. They only did 2 days of 7. no, my name's going on that certificate. That's not happening.
Yeah, it's interesting too to think that the kids that achieved that had that major wilderness experience and that breakthrough, and then if someone who didn't might feel like, whoa, I feel inferior, and it's like, well, I mean, I can't help that, I suppose, I mean, because deep down they probably know exactly what they did, you know what I mean? They bailed out, and now they probably regret it. That's where that's coming from. I mean, because if they didn't care, then they couldn't be bullied about it. They couldn't be teased about it. If they genuinely didn't care, they would be like, you can make fun of me all I want. I wanted to go home and play Xbox. I don't care. But they probably care. They do care. They're not happy with their decision, would be my guess.
Well, yeah, what I'm finding now is you're right, but they don't know that until like 2 or 3 years later.
Okay, yeah.
Later, and that's different. Well, I don't know if it's different. I can't remember back in the time, but I do know that those guys are they have the epiphany back. The advantage of me teaching for this many years is I can see students that I've taught before and doing great things or not great things. But I think also too, I also taking students at risk out. At one point, I wanted to revisit them, saying, "Okay, what are you doing in life?" And there's some in jail. I actually went before Kingston Pen closed. There was one guy in jail. There was a bunch of them too, and they all said that wilderness did change their lives. And I said, "Really? Like that trip we did really did change your life? Like seriously?" And they all of them. I did 13 separate interviews. They all said it did, Kevin, because we weren't at home dealing with the issues at home. We were dealing just with our own selves. And I've told this story many times. It was a great, great story of Jason. And again, I can't make this stuff up. It's a true story. I did a trip with students at risk, and Jason had issues with cocaine. He was off cocaine. He was just doing dope. And then he was doing his meds for his anxiety issues, probably bipolar. We're not sure. And again, I don't check their charts. They can't. That's not my job. I'm just the counselor has that job. And what happened was I made the huge mistake by doing a linear trip. So we did from A to B and then back to A. And you shouldn't do that. You do a loop, and they don't know where they are, so they always keep with you because they think they're lost. But so it was the second last day, and we're coming back, and I said to the counselor, I went, "Jason's not doing well. He's very uptight. He's talking to me. He's not talking to you. Usually they don't like the counselor, right?" And she said, "Well, no, he's fine." I went, "I don't think he's fine. I'm not an expert at all. I'm just a person that identifies trees for him. But I don't think he's doing fine. All the other students don't like him. There's anxiety building. He's going to boot tonight because he knows where he is." She goes, "No, he's not." I went, "Okay, whatever." Like in fact, at that job, I was volunteering too. I wasn't even being paid at this point. I just volunteered. So I said, "Okay." But at midnight, sure enough, the tent, the kids come to my tent. "Kevin, Jason's gone." "Oh, son of a." No, I have to go find him. So sure enough, the canoe's gone, and I go out canoeing on the lake, and I know the area, and I see him in the distance, and there's a full moon, and here's a magical thing, Dave. Like again, not the negative, the positive. I could have chased him and yelled at him and said, "Go back to camp," right? Or I could let nature do it. And you've been in the woods a lot. Let nature do it. It's a magical thing, right? It'll transform you. So I had nothing else to do. So I paddled behind him. He got to the portage, went across the portage. I portaged. He got to the next lake, got to the next lake. But then a storm came in, and then I got caught up to him. I said, "Hey, Jason, you want to get shelter?" "Oh, yeah, Kevin." Of course, the phobia, right? So get a tarp up, get a fire going. And that skill set that I know how to be comfortable out there. I am very, very comfortable in the woods. I love being in the woods, right? Whereas he is like, "Oh, God." So I did the really important thing. I said nothing to him. I just sort of sat there and did nothing. And then the sun came up, and I said, "Okay, we need to go back to camp, Jason." And I went, "Yeah, I know. I messed up, really messed up." So, "Okay, well, let's go back." Nothing. We get to the last lake, and I go, "I just got to ask Jason, like, what drug did you bring?" Because they're not allowed to bring any drugs. Yeah. I said, "What drug were you on?" And he goes, "Ecstasy." I went, "Ecstasy? You're on ecstasy? Well, what the hell were you on ecstasy?" And he goes, "I don't know. That's all I had when I left home. And I messed up, Kevin." But yeah, here's the cool thing. That kid finished that program, graduated, and now he's taking students at risk out in Algonquin that have drug addiction problems.
That's incredible. That's the power right there of being out there. It's this thing that we've talked about it already. We've tried to quantify it. But until you get out there and spend some time, it becomes so obvious at the same time, but also sometimes so hard to quantify. And now that story's in the book. That's one of the things you were thinking about when you're out there on that Minas link as well.
You do a lot of thinking when you're on a trip, eh? Like whether you're climbing a mountain or whether you're going over portage, you do a lot of thinking.
Totally.
Or you listen to really bad music in your head.
Yes. Oh, yes. You talk about that in the book too, and I had to laugh. I mean, I was remembering this time I was hiking. Actually, the last time it was really bad. It was a couple of years ago. I did this long hike in Sleeping Giant Provincial Park, and I just couldn't. I heard this song on the radio in my car in the morning, and then I just couldn't get it out of my head all day, and it just ran through my head, and I swear I felt like it was going to ruin the experience. Now in retrospect it didn't at all, of course, you know what I mean, but it was driving me nuts. But I think everyone can relate to that. And that's the funny thing about this book, is that, like I said before, it does follow that mindset of the wilderness traveler, whether it's a day or a week or more in the wilderness, that your mind, sometimes I try to be really mindful and peaceful and in the moment, listening to the birds and stuff like that, but most of the time I'm having conversations in my head. I'm just, I don't know what's going on half the time. And you articulated that very well. And I think people that have spent a lot of time in wilderness will see that right away and enjoy that.
It is so crucial that you listen to a good song before you start a trip. I had Who's a Barbie Girl in the Barbie.
Yeah, that's one of them. Yeah.
28-day solo trip. I could not get that song out of my head.
That's funny. Usually I think I've ever had it last more than a day with me. I feel like going to sleep resets my brain or something like that. But
I can't do that. I wish I could. It's a brain work. It sticks Mr. Roboto.
Yeah.
Oh, that's just a bad song. It's the end of the whole band.
Oh, that's so funny. So, Kevin, I think that's about all the time we have. But before we go, what's the name of your book again for everyone?
Once Around Algonquin, an Epic Canoe Journey. What's really funny is I've only had one negative comment because I was nervous. Here you're writing about a route that people have done and people have admired, and Algonquin, they love Algonquin. I had one guy come up to me at the Toronto show and he goes, "This is a farce. I want my money back." I went, "What's wrong?" He goes, "You didn't go around Algonquin. You did like a sausage shaped loop."
So he wanted you to only be on the borders, right? Just right on the borders.
But Andy actually agreed. Andy was there at the time. In fact, actually, it was really funny. Andy had the blue, showed up, and he was signing my book with my mother, by the way, and my daughter. They were signing my book. I wasn't. That was a weird story. But he said, yeah, it would have been a better trip if we actually went around Algonquin as opposed to link up to all of it. And I went, yeah, but we wouldn't have done all 6 watersheds, and we wouldn't have done the Minas Link. And the thing, so the guy goes, yeah, that's what you should have called the book, the Minas Link. I went, no, the Minas Link would tell people not to go up there. Like, it's not a negative.
Minas,
better title. So I kind of dismissed him. Have you ever been at a show? Well, you've done a lot of right, where you get the one person. There's all these people around you that are just amazing, and the one person that sucks your soul.
Yeah, it's amazing how much an effect they can have sometimes, though, too. You get all this positive energy, and one person has something bad to say, and for some reason, I don't know, maybe it's just me that I think about them for the rest of the day when I've forgotten all the 150 other people that were nice to me. But it's human nature, I guess. I don't know.
No, you gotta ignore them for sure. Yeah, it's a thing you have to learn. So just especially on social media, you'll have 200 good comments, one negative, and you'll think about the negative.
So where can people find the book?
Well, hopefully a bunch of bookstores will have it, but yeah, I got to say probably Amazon is the quickest and best, and it's doing really well. I'm terrified. Are
you going to self-publish another? Is that something you'd want to do again, or?
Well, you know what? That's a really good question, because my publisher has asked me to do some other book ideas, and so I'm not going away from book publishing, so I'm not doing that. But yeah, I would do it again. I learned a lot, and it might be easier the second time around. But the great thing is, anybody out there that has a really good story, and it's got to be a good story. If you can tell a good story, you edit my stuff. You know my stuff is crap when you see it.
Yeah, it's not crap. The story is always there, though. You always have the good story to tell, and you got a good voice. That's why people like it.
An editor is number one. If you can find an editor that actually can fix your stuff, but you can also tell a story, that is what's writing about. And I've talked, and you think about my time, I've met some amazing people. Like and canoeists too, like Gord Downey. He came up. He was a big paddler.
Mm-hmm.
Guy from Blue Rodeo. The guy from there's a whole bunch of musicians. Mm-hmm. Margaret Atwood. There's I remember Red Green.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they're all paddlers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's that connection. But it's really cool is that they all told me you need to tell the story, and then the editor will fix the story. So make sure if you're going to self-publish, do it right, and do not get your grandmother to read the script.
I remember being in university, and one of my professors said that a similar thing about that. And he said, when you want input on something and you give it to their friends and they say, I like it, what they're saying is, I like you. And that always resonated with me. You give it to someone who you have a good relationship with, and they say, "Oh, it's great." What they're saying is, "You're great." They're not saying it's great. You need someone to really give you the feedback, right?
Oh, you do. Like you think about it, Roy McGregor, Alec Ross, and James Raffin, all of them friends. I've been around for a long time, so I have all these friends that are in the canoe world, writing world, and I sent them the script. And to have Roy McGregor say, "This is an incredible book, Kevin, I'll do a review," was wow.
Yeah.
However, there's some spelling errors. Even though I paid an editor already, he goes, "No, there's." And then Alec Ross said, "Yeah, there's a lot of spelling errors. You got to look at this again." And even my mom at the end of it saying, "Well, there's a lot more spelling errors." So yeah, it's
proofreading. Proofreading and editing, they're two different skills, though. And in a lot of ways, proofreading is tough. Like, I mean, you got to have. I would never let Explore go to press without another proofreader looking at it beside me, because your brain is hardwired to ignore typos, and I mean, it's very frustrating, actually.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, and so self-publishing. Don't think you're going to write a book and then not get an editor or an editor. Well, you can if you want.
So take it seriously. That's your advice to anyone who wants to do this. Take it. You are not just self-publishing. You are acting as a publisher, and you should treat it accordingly. It's not just hammer out a draft, send it in, hit publish, and be done with it.
Yeah. If you do that, then you're not going to go. Well, man, I shouldn't say this, but I don't think you can go anywhere with that. Yeah. If my whole
if you do,
life,
you're very talented.
Well, maybe I've never seen that though.
No,
in fact, I know all the writers in Canada, and they'll all say it's like it's a team that creates a book. Yes, it's your idea, but it's not an individual thing. And if self-publishing you think is an individual thing, you're not going to go far. And you really know you need to. The greatest thing too is that you do actually have to know your stuff. The greatest thing about social media is that the one guy, he said, "So read your guidebook, Kevin, on Quetico. So you did those trips?" I went, "Yeah." Mm-hmm. Why would I write a guidebook and not do the trips? He goes, "Well, a lot of people would."
People do, and it's honestly, it's so easy to suss them out. Usually, I mean, you can tell right away whether or not they've been there. And you don't even have to have been there. They don't have that authority in their voice, which is, I think, why people like you, is that you do speak from a place of authority.
Now you're making me nervous, Dave.
Well, don't be nervous. Don't be nervous. People are going to like the podcast, I hope, and people are going to like Once Around Algonquin, an epic canoe journey.
Well, thanks a lot. I love Explore. This is great. I've been blogging for you guys for many years. Fantastic magazine, and I love the beard. Nobody can see it.
Yeah, it's a little longer than I would like it right now, but thanks.
Oh, I should have married you when I had the chance.
All right, man. I'll talk to you later. Kevin loves to talk. It's a big part of being the happy camper, I suppose. You may have noticed we've recorded for about 10 minutes after I said, well, that's about all the time we have left. But the wilderness is inspiring, and inspirational stuff has a way of stirring conversation. Kevin's new book is also inspirational. Look for Once Around Algonquin, an Epic Canoe Journey on Amazon, or ask your local bookseller. I'm David Webb, editor of Explore magazine. Thanks for joining me today. And hey, live the adventure.